Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and wherever you are listening in this wonderful, beautiful world that we're living in right now. My name is Jason Cooper. I work in sort of training and sales development, and have been over the last number of years. So, what this podcast is all about, we're basically on a mission to discover some of the most cutting-edge L&D techniques in use today. We work with companies like yours that are dealing with remote training, as that's the nature of the world so far. And one of the most pressing topics in 2021. My guest today is McKenna, who, ironically enough, I've known for quite a number of years now. When I was doing sales, I knocked down on his door at Complete many years ago, trying to sell him some online digital advertising and stuff like that. So Aaron, you're very welcome today.
Thank you.
So Aaron, your past has been in quite an eclectic experience. You were managing director at the Digital Marketing Institute. For people in the big wide world out there, they don't know what the Digital Marketing Institute. They teach a wide range of digital certifications pretty much around the globe. Aaron, you could probably give a better synopsis than I can. And you're also you're working for the UCD, which is Ireland's largest university. So you run bespoke courses on leadership, business, and so much more. Aaron, would you give a little bit better background than I did just then?
That was perfect. There are many people who would describe my experience as far worse than eclectic. But yeah, no, I've worked for a long time in, I suppose, what you call digitally enabled businesses, right? So e-commerce businesses, global education, and lately at UCD, at Ireland's largest university, as I say. And the past couple of years before I was here were probably my first foray into the education space at DMI, and really interesting company. Started out doing digital marketing training here in Ireland, grew a bit of a global footprint. Decided to create a proper certification for digital marketing, which wasn't really in existence before that, and took it to the world, and had a lot of fun and a lot of success doing it. So DMI would sell direct to individuals, sell through corporates, through L&D departments, a lot of people involved in digital transformation, and also through a great partner network. And we sold the business, and a couple of years later, I left to come to UCD. UCD is I suppose, a public sector university, but very interested in looking at ways that they can do innovative things and new things, to service the core market and help to drive on education in Ireland and indeed around the world. UCD is Ireland's global university, and also to find a few ways, I'm sure, to make a few quid while we're at it as well. And and probably the most successful thing I've been working on in my time at UCD to date is a thing called the UCD Professional Academy, which is what I like to colloquially call everyday courses for everyday folks. I'm sure some brand person is going to come along someday and tell me, no, we're calling it this, but that's what it is, Jason. So we do a range of courses, everything from project management to data analytics, leadership management, as you say, and so on. And we work with a lot of professionals who are kind of in their career. Most of the folks who come to us are 10 years or more actually in work, and they're coming back for short, sharp, kind of 30 plus hour courses that they can bring into their workplace the day after they learn something. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of value. So UCD, for example, has a really top-ranked MBA. It's one of the top-ranked in Europe, and that's a fantastic experience for any working professional who wants to go and undertake something like that. But let's say it's up here, and we're down here in terms of let's get you some short, sharp skills into the workplace today, tomorrow, and hopefully actually bring you on a journey then with UCD over time into bigger and better things while we're at it.
Yeah, because soft skills now are one of the top things that you can possibly have in any business now, regardless what if it's leadership or whether it's sales or Excel training or whatever. It makes the biggest impact within businesses today. And I know coming from now, I'm in this area now, so I totally understand where it is. So how's the business really pivoted in the last 12 months since this mad world that we're in right now with COVID? So what's changed?
Well, digital transformation at scale. Digital transformation was an interesting thing that people spoke about, and then
Yeah.
I think everybody had to hightail it at speed. So for us, for example, we were actually delivering pretty much exclusively in the classroom. 13, 14 months ago. And we had to move everybody online. The whole university, like many higher education institutions, had to move lots of people online at speed, and successfully did so, maintained high customer satisfaction whilst doing it, which I kind of laugh about it. I was expecting some blowback somewhere along the way, but actually it's a credit to the people who are lecturing, the people who are working in the background to actually deliver our courses and maintain our operations, that actually we kept everybody happy. But we've
Mhm.
really been looking now and saying, okay, well, phase one, get everybody online. Phase two, which we were kind of doing anyway at the time, is let's find platforms, tools, partners we can work with who can really elevate the learning experience. And I'm a
Mhm.
big believer that it doesn't matter, even after COVID, when you return to the classroom, if that's the setting you want to return to, if you're in a learning environment where it's augmented with tools, platforms, whatever, that are maybe designed with ed tech and e-learning at the front, and you
Mhm.
think somebody's sitting at home and they're sitting on their computer doing the learning. Actually, it's going to be highly beneficial to you no matter what setting you're in. If you're in a blended setting, if you're in a pure play online setting, or if you're in the classroom. So I think probably if you want to find a silver lining in COVID for higher education, because there's definitely been a lot of dark cloud, but a silver lining I think is that a lot of organizations have discovered new ways of doing things that will probably look to enhance the student experience, the learning experience, and ultimately the outcomes
Mhm.
over the long term. And I think that's going to be super interesting to watch as we return to, please God, normality at some point in the near future.
Uh, as and when that might be, we don't know. Other people that I've discussed this topic with is what it has done is saved a lot of money. It's saved a lot of airfares for the international companies that I've been speaking with. Like now, they don't have to pay for hotels. They don't have to pay for this. They don't have to pay for rooms and lunches and all of that, which is good. So that's the cost saving. But the other side of it is they miss the personal connection with people, which is
Right.
a miss. How do you think the next 12 months will play out? What's if you had a crystal ball in front of you, what would that look like?
Yeah, 12 months or 24 or 36 months. I think first of all, the comeback from COVID is going to be slower than people would like.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. I think you're right to your point about costs. I think the CFO of Amazon came out one of his quarterly updates last year and said that
Rubbing
he was
hands
saving
together.
he was saving about £1 billion on travel that year, and that's all. Even for a company of Amazon scale, that's a lot of money. But I think in future those sorts of person-to-person interactions are going to become more meaningful, more thoughtful. I think that you will have to think twice before hopping on an airplane to go to a meeting, hopping on
Yeah.
an airplane to bring everyone to a seminar or something like that. And so I think that it's not going to be lost completely, because people, if I look at, I was watching the news last night, and people in care homes in the UK are being allowed for the first time to hold hands with their loved ones. So they're not allowed to hug them and they're not allowed to kiss them, but they're allowed to hold hands with them. And that's the sort of thing that people really want. They want that kind of human connection. And I think that that's never going to go away. And if we transpose that into a business context, that's still going to be important. That being said, I think that you're going to see a reduction in time usage and dwell time spent flying on airplanes and all the rest of it. I think a lot of airlines, for example, that rely heavily on business passengers to kind of keep their profit margins up. They're looking at their business models and saying we're going to have to upend this completely. Now, maybe things will come back and things will be completely different, completely the same. Different what people are forecasting, but that's kind of where the money is, and I think that then investment moves into other areas. Investment moves into technologies that can bring us closer together. How can you make conferencing events? How can you make classroom learning environments more I guess more sustainable for humans who are sitting behind a screen, because it's tiring, it's not as engaging. Sometimes it can be more difficult for some people to learn and engage, even engage in meetings and so on. So how do you solve for that? And I think, like, I was looking at some data from PitchBook, and last year spending by venture capitalists on ed tech companies or investments into them more than doubled versus the previous year. And I think that's a bet on sustainable returns, because the behavior is going to change. And as I mentioned earlier, even where people do return to in-person settings, they're likely to be using the technology that they picked up online to try and better their experience overall. So I think there is going to be a shift in how we interact and where we interact and so on. But then I think there's also, when we even get back to interacting in person, I think there's a significant body of change to how that's going to work to hopefully enhance our experiences and make them better experiences, irrespective of where we are.
I was just thinking while you're talking, actually, I don't know whether you remember a few years back, probably about 10, 15 years, there's a bit of technology called Habbo Hotel, where people can meet virtually online in a virtual space. And I think that sort of technology with the VR headset is where things will probably be going. We've fast forwarded about 5 years in terms of how we utilize and use technology, more so than ever before, utilizing our broadband, our space around here. So I think the learning experience, especially online, is going to be richly enhanced. So there's a more, insightful way of learning. And we know there's a thing called Pomodoro technique, which is 25 minutes learn and then take a break, 25 minutes learn. You do that up to 2 hours. But the brain can't concentrate more than 25 minutes at a time. We start to play with our phones and look out the window and do all of those wonderful techniques. So how do you think the blended stuff is going to work in that sort of environment now? Now it's going to be part classroom, hopefully, and then more so, I'd say 50-50. But what do you see the split going forward?
If I had a perfect answer for that, Jason, I'd be a wealthier man. But I think that I reckon that there are a couple of ways that the technology can influence the blended environment, right? So let's take one example. I think is what value do people really get out of the person-to-person interactions? And usually it's things like discussion, right? So for example, in a blended learning environment, you could move to do more of potentially, and this ranges by subject. We're probably not going to do this with our vets. We're not going to get them sitting at home getting Mr. Fluffy Wuffy in for an experiment. But depending on the subject that you're doing, you may have a situation where maybe you do more of your learning behind a screen, in, as you mentioned, maybe an augmented sort of of an environment, chunks of learning, bit of a quiz, reinforce, interesting tools you can work with to get you to consume some information. And then maybe the human-to-human interaction is more focused on discussion, embedding of the learning and understanding, rather than someone standing there delivering slides to you. And so that'll be one example. Another great example. We have a program in data analytics. We work with a great partner called Data Camp, who have built a super learning platform. You can learn, and then you can kind of sit there in your browser without a lot of having installed a load of software or anything, and you can do coding assignments there and then, and bang, get your answers, right? And I've just simplified their super product into a 3-second pitch, but there you go. But we use their platform, and so we have learners who are going off, who are learning on that platform, and then when they're coming and they're interacting with a lecturer, it's really where can the lecturer add value to the specific challenge of deepening your understanding rather than just teaching you at the front. And I'm sure there will probably be a lot of studies post-COVID in particular about the right way to do that. Should you have lecturer, then go away and do something, lecturer again, or what's the right way to do it? And certainly we're doing a lot of learning in that space ourselves. But I think that there's an example there. For example, if you return to the classroom now, instead of hopping on a Zoom, maybe you're in a lecture theatre, you can have easier breakout groups, or you can do interesting things. You can wander and have a coffee and chat to your fellow learners. Learn from one another. Like there's a lot of intangibles there as well. But at the same time, you crack open your laptop in the lecture theatre, and you guys can recomplete an exercise, look at something, get a deeper level of understanding. So I guess it's an example of where you can marry the technology and the learning experience. And actually, COVID maybe forced you to make that. Maybe there were definitely a lot of people who were ahead of the curve and who were doing that anyway. But maybe COVID has pushed in aggregate more learning institutions into that space, use tools, platforms, etc. And they look at it and they say, okay, well, we're back in more normal circumstances. Let's bring this stuff with us.
They were doing a while back. They had a hologram teacher, hologram lecturer, didn't they, in some of the universities? So they were at home and they were teaching. So maybe there's a premise on that. I don't know how far we are down the line with that. That learning of having the holographic appearance, maybe a holographic appearance of. I don't know whether you. I'm probably going off on a tangent here. I don't know if you've seen the last Star Wars, a few Star Wars ago, where they were all holograms around a table. So maybe that's where things might go going forward in a few years' time. What I was actually thinking of is how learning and how people learn at their own pace by blended learning. The artificial intelligence must be there to prompt you and focus you in on certain parts of your learning journey and give you more help depending where you actually are at the moment. I can see that happening, and I'm sure it is happening from your experience.
I mean, a big trend in corporate learning environments is creating learning pathways for people. So you create analytics at the front. Let's see where everybody's skills are. Let's identify, Mary and Jack and Joe and Jane have different needs. So let's not just say, hey, everybody, we're doing a project management course. Let's say, okay, right, we're doing some training in project management. We're starting at different points. Let's assess that, and then let's bring people through it. And I think, to your point, there is evolutions of that will occur. So potentially, real-time adjustment to that, real-time prompts, and so on. Sounds really easy when you say it really fast. AI can solve that problem, but I think that there's a lot of development into that space. And if I talk to particularly corporate learning and development managers, what they're most interested in, they really want to get skills into the workforce. Everybody acknowledges that you don't stand still on skills. You got to be constantly learning, upskilling, also investing in your employees so they will stay with you. But they need to minimize the time and impact on the business. They need to maximize the return on the investment, and also keep people engaged. Because if you sit down, Mary and Jack, and Mary knows most of project management inside out, you're wasting her time. She's going to sleep. She's not getting a huge amount out of it. Get her into something that's really going to enhance her skills and enhance her outcomes in the workplace. Whereas you have another employee and they're just at the beginning of their journey there. Let's bring them on the longer journey, but let's not have the two of them sitting side by side trying to learn the same thing. And Mary's looking out the window, and now Jack's wondering what's outside the window too. And he's like, yeah. So I think there definitely is a lot in that in terms of personalizing learning experiences. Particularly, it'll be driven in the corporate context, but what comes out of there will filter down, I'd say, into the day-to-day learning.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. The thing that I've always been quite passionate about is creating an environment that builds in habits of learning. So they do the course today, but what happens after that? Because you lose, if you don't use it, you lose it after 24 hours. So you lose about 50% of the knowledge that's been given to you. So what's your ideas and thoughts about creating a sort of a habit environment where they have to keep on going and learning back for what they've done, but maybe implement what they've done in so the neurons are wired and fired together, so that there's a connection in the brain?
I think there's a couple of things. So first of all, I think you can try to create learning environments where learning is reinforced, and you definitely want to retain more while they're going through the process. But then to your point, and we deal a lot obviously with working professionals, they're returning in scenario to the workplace. There's a significant question about integrated L&D type programs. Like I remember working on a program for a blue chip once. They were going through a digital transformation within their sales organization, and to be highly reductive, right? Let's use our CRM better. Let's use social selling skills, etc., etc., etc. And it wasn't just everybody go do a course in social selling. It was a genuine, let's do a course of learning. Let's get managers involved. Let's integrate it into the work that we do. Let's make a big deal out of it. Let's get people through this, and let's watch the results filter through, and then show people what the results are, so the next cohort coming through can do better, can take it seriously as well. And so I think there's a role for that, and trying to find ways that through, again, platform and product, you can create and make probably easy differentiated experiences for again, managers, so they can participate. Even if they're not participating in the learning, they can participate in the learning journey and the experience. They can follow what their staff are doing. They can try to bring that into the working environment. I think that's super important. And then I think that there's, depending on your industry, depending on your space, there's a lot of room for example, if you're learning more about different digital marketing platforms, you might get into the space of using sandbox environments, testing things before you bring it into your workplace and so on, and having this natural progression. So there's a whole variety of possibly tools that you can use, but ultimately I think it does actually come back to how you structure it yourself, and as a learning provider, if we can help you structure that, if it's in a workplace context, is it something that's really been driven through the line in terms of the organization? If you're an individual undertaking the training by yourself, to have that awareness, to actually bring the learning into your working environment. And we see it all the time. We see students who are proactively going back to their organizations and saying, okay, well, I'm learning this stuff, and so I'd like to work on this, and I'd like to do that. It's going to help me in my learning, and their organizations are supporting them in that. And I think that's super effective as well. I think there is an element of the old-fashioned sort of let's once we're through all the tools and the platforms, let's make a conscious decision to bring this in and exercise this skill rather than just put the book down, go to work, and come back a week later and we're like, oh, what was that all about?
So there's I like that. There's a thing at the moment now, and by the future of work, is when people get to a certain age, probably like myself, they change, and all of a sudden they want a career change. And probably this COVID thing has really made a massive impact on that. Now there has to be a lot more out there to enable people to upskill or pivot into the business that they are and whether it's a corporate environment or whether it's an SME environment. But now they have to sort of remaster the learnings to do something slightly different within the organization that they work for. Now there's massive amounts of technology out there to help that. How do you see that? How do you see that making an impact in sort of, I think they call it the grey market. The grey market.
Well, I think we've known for a long time that people don't just have one career now, right? So that's not going to come as a surprise. I think, like if I look at the pandemic and I look at people, for example, here in Ireland who are losing their jobs or being furloughed, you have a lot of really, really, I guess, smart people who, typically speaking, they have some form of higher education behind them. And you see a lot of people in, for example, back office in hotel and travel. You see a lot of people in who maybe would have said to themselves, you know what, I'm working in accounting in a hotel group, and sure, this job is safe as houses. Now, again, pre-pandemic, I think even lawyers are being lined up for AI, there's that word again, and automation to do away with part of their work. Now, they'll probably manage to keep their hand in the pie because it's a highly regulated industry. But effectively, you have people who are in spaces where their jobs are being transformed. Banking, another example. Plenty of banks shutting branches because everybody's moving online. What happens to the people who've worked there for a long time? They're highly skilled. I believe that there's no such thing as an unskilled worker, but highly skilled individuals. And now you're going to turn around to them and you're going to say, okay, well, we have a ton of job vacancies in data analytics. And they go, oh, what? He said, well, look, in your job, you've worked with things like Excel. You've worked, whether you know it or not, with some form of data analytics. Let's bring you on a journey, probably a digital literacy, before we make you a data scientist type of a journey. And I think that it's incumbent on learning providers, it's incumbent on employers, not simply to turn and say, here's the skills we need, but actually to create ways for different individuals to go on that journey. Because I think if you're and you may not be affected by COVID, you may just be wanting a change in your career. You might be happy in sales, but you want to move into, again, data analytics or something like that. That's what you want to do. Maybe that's the side of sales you really enjoy, and so you want to augment your skills, and maybe you're going to come back in a sort of a sales analytics type role or something like that. I think it's incumbent on those in the education space, for these people to look at ways that you can make the experience accessible. Like if I talk to professional academy students, huge amount of them will say, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Now, we put a lot of resources in place to try to make their entry, if they haven't been involved in any sort of formal education in a long time, as easy as possible. But increasingly you see this, for example, maybe coming up in apprenticeship programs, obviously aimed at a slightly different cohort, but apprenticeship programs where they're really putting together work and study in a particular way that's likely to lead to a positive outcome versus study, and out you go into the industry and good luck. So I think the way that people learn, I think there is actually a space, even though we think of apprentices being left behind the ears, there's a space for more job-based learning, apprenticeships, if you want to call them that, or returnships was another expression I heard, particularly for folks returning to the workforce. So, for example, you have a lot of women take time out to raise some kids, returning to the workforce.
Of course,
and you want to find the best ways to support them. If you turn around and say, okay, well, the skills maybe have changed a little, or things have moved on a little bit over the last 5-6 years, for example, how do you actually make that a job-based integrated learning experience so they can push on? So there's a lot of different examples I think of different cohorts who are engaged in education, education and work,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the intersection of them. And I think that the more we can do to combine those two things to make it more accessible to folks, I think that's for the better, because a lot of folks, they're out there, they're in the world of work, and then when they're presented with learning opportunities, too many of them are purely academic in nature, which
yeah.
it has its role to play, but it looks scarier than it is, and I think there's a lot of space to play and win if you can make the experience for those folks a more fulfilling one, an easier one, and one that gets them plugged into work as fast as possible.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. It's really quite fascinating. I recently went back and did a Ulster University course a couple of years ago, so I'm in that market as well. So I wanted to re-pivot. I love learning now. It's only put towards last 10 years. I've really delved into it, gone on to course after course after course. But last question for you, Aaron, is how do you personally learn? What do you do to sort of upskill yourself?
That's a great question. I think I'm a learn by interacting person. Now, so I enjoy reading, do a lot of reading, but I think that there's a lot of learning you do when you're talking to smart people. Like when I go on a course, for example,
Yes.
not most, a significant amount of the learning that I probably do is in the interaction with the my fellow students. Maybe it's not
Mhm.
the learning, maybe it's just what keeps me engaged.
Yeah, yeah,
Probably one of the hardest things I found about COVID is that I've been described as one of these people who manages by walking around, and I really do enjoy that sort of human interaction, and certainly when I'm in a learning environment, I do. And so I'll happily go away and I'll read a book and learn what's in it and so on.
mhm,
But then, even more so than sitting watching a video, maybe. But then I will like to sit down and talk to people, find the
mhm.
space to talk to them, even virtually. I'm with my management team at the moment. We have a bit of a book club going, and we're looking at different titles, and we're kind of looking at the concepts and then trying to relate them back. Does this relate back to our business or not? And have a discussion about it in that context. And on the one hand, I think it's just a good thing to do. But on the other hand, I was actually just trying to partially replicate a space where we could sit and have a conversation, yes, about business, but not
Yeah, yeah,
necessarily, what's the graph of the week, lads? But let's talk about something deeper and more meaningful. And
yeah.
so I think
Agree.
for me, it is that sort of human interaction is super important to me, and I think it's probably what reinforces, drives, and keeps me engaged with a lot of learning that I do.
I totally and utterly agree. I think the human interaction is where you learn the most. That's why I love doing these podcasts, because I learn huge amounts from people, and then I can apply a lot of them. And I've got it as a recording as well, so it really helps me to just go back over it and review and go, oh, right, these are the good points that I like to take and embed that learning for myself. So, Aaron, it's been an absolute pleasure and great to catch up with you today. Really appreciate that. Um, You've been listening to Growing Professionals, funded by Use Because, deeper learning from the greatest minds to have ever put pen to paper. Understand, remember, and deliberately practice the most actionable content from the best business books ever written. Use Because actually pushes all that wonderful learning into a really easy way, palatable way, so you can learn from some of the most wonderful minds in the world. Thank you so much again. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're an absolute gent, and wishing you all the very best success.
Thank you, Jason.
Hey, before you go, just a quick message about usebecause.com and what we're all about. We believe that true learning happens when you understand, remember, and deliberately practice your newly acquired knowledge. So with that in mind, you can get access to our purpose-built learning tools to help you do just that. So try all our tools for all of our episodes, free for a month. You can cancel anytime. For all of this and all of the podcast episodes, head over to usebecause.com. Until next time.